The wind that scoured the top of the wall was a living thing, razor-edged, hungry, and forever whispering of death. Stannis Baratheon felt it flensing the bare skin between visor and gorget as he stood upon the icy parapet at dawn, a dark silhouette beside the hulking shape of the winch cage. Below and behind him, the black-clad sentries of Castle Black stamped their feet and cursed softly into their scarves, yet none complained aloud in the king's hearing. Men seldom found voice enough for complaint when Stannis's grim blue gaze swept over them, measuring, weighing, judging. This dawn should have carried triumph. The king had marched north past the wall, broken Mance Raider's wildling host, and bent the wildings, what remained of them, into an uneasy alliance. Yet victory tasted of ash. Supplies were dwindling. Horses died nightly, ribs protruding beneath dull coats. The king's southern bannermen muttered of endless snow and blasphemous sorcery. Worst of all was the choice Melisandre had laid before him only a fortnight past, her red eyes luminous in torchlight as she urged the sacrifice of his only child, the Princess Shireen, to wake the stone dragon and summon the fiery sword Lightbringer. Stannis had listened. He had stood in the dark of his audience chamber while candle flames guttered and Melisandre's rubies pulsed like heartbeats. And he had listened as the witch painted visions of glorious conquest in fire and shadow. He had thought of Robert's crown, the treachery of Lannisters, the brittle, broken realm that might yet be forged anew in honest steel, if only the Lord of Light were appeased. A king must make a king's sacrifices, she said, and he had said no. The decision had not come easily. Stannis Baratheon's heart was a fortress, angular, unyielding, crenellated against sentiment. Yet when he closed the door upon Melisandre's whispering flames and went to Shireen's chamber, he found his daughter asleep beneath a heavy bearskin, her cheek nestled against the gentle curve of her mother's arm. Celis' thin face was slack with rare peace, strands of dark hair splayed across the pillow. Shireen's mouth was slightly open, the corners curved as though she tasted some sweet dream. In the banked glow of a single brazier Stannis saw them as strangers might, a sickly child and a brittle, faith-driven mother. He saw too the flicker of who he had once been, a younger brother carving ships from driftwood, unbowed even when no one came to watch them sail. His daughter breathed, and each rise of her small chest struck him like a dagger. Suddenly the price Melisandre asked seemed steeper than all the kingdoms of men. Now, on the wall, he thought of that night again as he watched pale gold seep across the eastern sky. The wind howled and shook the wooden cage that clung to the outer face of the wall. Thick iron chains rattled. Hoarfrost shivered loose in white showers. In a moment, the cage would descend to ground level where tents clustered like hobbling shadows across the frozen courtyard. But first the princess must step into its biting air. Steel-shod boots crunched behind him. Ser Davos Seaworth halted at a respectful distance. The Onion Knight's beard was rimed with frost. His gloved hands bore fresh scratches from hauling barrels of dwindling salt fish. "Your Grace," he said quietly, "the men are near ready to march." "Near ready will not suffice," Stannis replied without turning. "They will be ready when I give the word." He took another heartbeat to read the horizon. Low clouds bruised purple, the promise of fresh snow. "How fares the princess?" Davos hesitated, shivering to be sure. "But she smiles, Your Grace, says she's eager to ride a horse of her own." The smuggler's mouth corked beneath the ice. "A small garron, perhaps, if one yet lives." "One will be found," Stannis said. He looked down then at the courtyard far below. Shireen stood between her parents, bundled in furs so thick only her scarred cheeks showed. Celis' gloved fingers clutched a leather-bound book of the seven-pointed star, newer scripture, favored since the king had refused the flames. Melisandre was nowhere to be seen. "Send word to the queen," Stannis said. "We ride within the hour." The march to Winterfell began as a muted dirge across endless white. 500 knights on dying horses, 2,000 infantry drawing half-rotted sledges, and 300 wildling spearmen who had bent knee after the battle in the Frostfangs. Behind them, wagons groaned under casks of sour wine and sacks of barley. The king rode at the head, Garron snorting in the cold, his banner snapping, a black stag within a fiery heart. Snow fell in lazy whirls all that day, soft as drowsing feathers, cloaking the world in hush. Shireen rode beside Davos at a gentler pace, cheeks pink with cold and excitement. Riders bore torches ahead of her, parting the twilight. Once, near dusk, a row of pines bent under their icy burden and loosed a thunderclap of powder across the column, startling horses into rearing fits. Shireen's mount skittered sideways. She clung to the reins, wide-eyed but unafraid. Davos steadied her. "You have your father's steel," the knight told her. She ducked her head, shy. "I only wish Mother saw it that way." In truth, Celis marched in a litter draped with crimson cloth, her prayers to the Lord of Light now tempered by her husband's stern refusal, but not extinguished. She avoided her daughter's curious gaze, and Shireen felt the chill more keenly for it. Melisandre, turned out of the king's inner councils, rode alone each evening to light her signal fires, her face an impassive mask above the glow. Even the wildlings muttered of her now, the red woman who had promised victory by fire and been rebuked, yet whose ruby-at throat still throbbed like a restless heart. The king's column angled east toward the King's Road 2 days later, skirting snow-smothered woods where the trees stood like gaunt soldiers forever at attention. Scouts brought tales of Bolton outriders prowling the forward track, lean men on wiry horses, circling like crows. One lad returned arrow-shot through the shoulder and whispered of pale riders wearing flayed man sigils. Stannis ordered double watches and sent Ser Godry faring with a dozen mounted knights to chase them off. Godry returned with 3 severed heads and a Bolton banner spattered black with frozen blood. Morale rose in the main column. The men cheered Stannis when he rode through the ranks that night, though the cheers curdled into coughs as cold settled deeper into marrow. At dusk they made camp beneath a ring of ancient barrows, half-collapsed mounds that bulged from the wind-carved snow. Fires were forbidden. Smoke would draw Boltons. Instead the men huddled in tents, gnawing frozen salt pork and praying the night away. Stannis kept no tent for himself. His war council met beneath an open tarp lashed between 2 frost-grimed wagons. Maps of the north weighed down beneath daggers fluttered in the gusts. "The Boltons number 5,000 at least," Ser Richard Horp said, rubbing stiff hands. "Cavalry heavy, and resupplied from the Dreadfort by short road. They'll be fresh." "Fresh meat can still spoil," Stannis answered. "Our steel will suffice." Ser Clayton Suggs spat in the snow. "If the Dreadfort sends more men, we're done." "We cannot fight them all at once," Stannis said, "so we shan't." His gauntlet finger traced the map toward an ink-smudged cluster of hills west of Winterfell. "Here lies the Weeping Water. A narrow ford crosses halfway to the castle. Melt and freeze has thinned the ice, Horp. We send decoys to draw Ramsay's horsemen onto it. The ice breaks. Their advantage drowns in black water." The lords shifted uneasily. "And if the ice holds?" Suggs asked. "Then we die with swords in hand," the king said. "Better that than freeze like sheep in this waste." They died many ways in the days that followed. 3 men succumbed that night to Blackfoot. A dozen more deserted beneath the cloak of dark, leaving only shallow depressions in pristine snow. Melisandre found their tracks at dawn and burned a strip of rag soaked in lamp oil, muttering that darkness gathers shadows to itself. Stannis silenced her with a look. When they broke camp, the sun hid behind milky cloud banks. The column wound between barrows and hardwood stands until the ground began to slope downward toward the Weeping Water Valley. Stannis rode ahead with his mounted knights, Davos at his side. To the east, serried ranks of pine rose in frosted tiers. Ravens croaked overhead. "Your Grace," Davos ventured while they trudged, "if we prevail and take Winterfell, the realm will speak of this march for ages. The men say you spared the princess and the snows eased for it." "The snows eased because the wind shifted," Stannis said. "The realm speaks lies. I do what honor requires." Davos nodded. "Aye, but men need tales, even honor-bound men. They'll follow a king who keeps his own blood safe." Stannis's jaw tightened. "They follow because I am their king." Yet even he could not stave off the flicker of warmth that pulsed beneath layered furs. The thought of Shireen alive, reading her dusty tomes by braziers, giggling at the antics of Ser Edric. Said a thin smile ghosting across weather-cracked lips. At Winterfell, Ramsay Bolton lounged upon a bearskin before a hearth so enormous one might roast an aurochs whole. The hall was thick with smoke, rich with the smells of spiced wine and dog flesh seared and served upon wooden platters. Servants hurried past, eyes lowered. Ramsay tore meat with sharp teeth, grease shining on his chin. "Stannis marches," whispered Maester Tybalt, white brows quivering. "Our outriders confirm." Ramsay flung a gnawed bone into the rushes. "Good. I have grown weary of butchering peasants." He stood, stretching lithe muscles. "Fetch my reavers. See the hounds fed twice. The king who hides behind burned gods shall find a warm northern welcome." Later, in the kennels, Theon Greyjoy knelt on muck-strewn straw, fingers trembling as he shackled the snarling bitch he called Hazel. A kennel master cuffed him. "Faster, reek!" Theon's breath plumed. Through the bars the dogs bayed, a savage hymn to winter. Somewhere above, horns drifted on cold drafts, calling men to arms. The battle was coming. Storm clouds belched snow across the Weeping Water Valley the night Stannis reached its northern rim. Scouts crawled on bellies to the river's edge and drove picks through gray ice, testing thickness. One pick punched through to black current 2 feet below. Stannis ordered his camp drawn back half a mile and set men cutting saplings to fashion palisades. Fires were lit at last, shielded by hides, feeding on timbers from sledges burned for warmth. Shireen watched from her tent flap, torchlight painting her face amber. She wrote names of faraway courtiers in the margins of a leather journal. Friends she had never met, people who had once sworn fealty to House Baratheon and might again. Her quill jerked when a horn blast echoed through camp, the 3-note signal of enemy approach. Davos hurried inside. "Princess, you must stay within," he urged. Shireen's eyes shone. "Father will win," she whispered. Davos prayed she spoke prophecy. Stannis arrayed his forces in 2 lines on the valley floor, torches guttering in raw wind. Godry Faring's mounted lances formed the left wing nearest the river ford. Wildling archers under Harma the Dog's Head held a rocky rise to the right. In the center stood the king, black stag rampant on his cloak, sword Lightbringer sheathed. A plain steel brand, for the blade had stubbornly refused to blaze however long Melisandre sang her flames. Now the Red Woman stood behind him, arms raised, palms crimson beneath rolling sleeves. She chanted in tongues older than rivers. Snow hissed where flakes touched the heat of her skin. Bolton trumpets bleated in answer. Out of swirling white rode 2,000 cavalry, armor washed bone gray by moonlight, banners whipping. The flayed man of Bolton, skin crimson against chambered silver. Ramsay led, astride a black courser, hunting horns slung across his back. He laughed, a shrill peal that carried across frozen stillness. Stannis raised his arm. A single blast from his own horn cut through the hush. The line advanced, trudging through knee-high drifts. Faring's horsemen shifted wooder banners forward, hoofs crunching on crusted powder. Harma's archers notched. Ramsay spurred ahead, confident. Stannis saw him gesture. A careless flourish, and Bolton riders fanned into wedge formation, intending to punch through the Baratheon center then wheel to the rear. Faring's knights angled toward the river, feigning panic. The Bolton wedge pursued, snow billowing beneath pounding hooves. At the ford the ice sheet gleamed like poured glass. Faring's horses pounded over, their weight spiderwebbing cracks. Bolton riders, heavier mailed, stormed after them. Halfway across, with water gurgling dark beneath, Stannis gave the silent signal. Faring's standard dipped, and the knights veered aside along a safer lip previously flagged by scouts. Bolton horses thundered into weakened crust. The ice moaned, fractured, and gave. In an instant men and beasts vanished, swallowed by black. The river roared up, shards of ice spinning like saw teeth. Screams echoed, muffled beneath closing water. Those on the far bank wheeled in confusion only to meet a rain of wildling arrows. Chaos rippled along Bolton ranks. Panic took them faster than winter wind. Stannis advanced at a measured pace. He struck the first rider with a two-handed swing that caved helm and skull alike. His footmen followed, driving spears into thrashing horses, cutting reins, dragging armored men to ground where axes fell. Blood steamed on snow, turning white into rust. Ramsay saw the ruin and cursed, signaling retreat toward Winterfell's distant torches. The king did not pursue far. Victory was the bait. Winterfell remained the snare. Stannis reformed his ranks, tended wounded, and left the frozen corpses to the wolves. That night he stood before a modest fire of dead pine and listened to the silence where Melisandre once would have woven portents in flame. The Red Woman kept to her own tent, her rubies dim. Davos approached. "A good day's work, your grace," the knight said around a steaming bowl of oat stew. 20 Boltons captured, near 300 drowned or dead. Stannis watched sparks drift skyward. "A good start," he allowed. "Winterfell yet stands." He turned, and Davos saw in his eyes an ember no snow could quench. Days blurred thereafter, measured in aching footfalls and the groan of dying horses. The columns skirted foothills to avoid Bolton patrols, trusting guides from Clan Norre to lead them through hidden gullies. Shireen rode the last surviving palfrey, cloaked in a white bearskin that made her seem a child of snow herself. When she tired, Davos lifted her before him and told tales of the stepstones. Warm seas, bronze men, ships painted bright as sunrise. She listened, dreaming of color. On the 5th evening, the distant towers of Winterfell crested the horizon. Gray granite softened by dusk. A haze of smoke hung above the castle, hearth fires and forge mingling. Wailing horns greeted the Baratheon scouts. Stannis ordered the army to ground 2 miles out, within a ring of low hills once used by King Torrhen Stark to muster levies. Siege trenches were scraped despite frozen soil. Wooden scorpions assembled in pieces, shields stacked to form ruddy breastworks. Through all this, Melisandre remained unseen. Bolton riders essayed the camp thrice that night, loosing flaming arrows before galloping back. Few found purchase. The snow itself conspired with Stannis. White mounds devoured sparks and smothered flame. At dawn, Stannis walked the perimeter alone, trailed by 2 guards. Frost rimed his beard. His breath hung like dragon smoke. A raven passed overhead, croaking. The king paused. "Send to the wall," he told his nearest man. "Tell Jon Snow that Stannis Baratheon holds Winterfell in sight. If the boy means to keep his pledge, let him ride to join us with every hand that can hold a spear." The messenger nodded and vanished. By midday, word came from within Winterfell. Ramsay Snow, calling himself Bolton, wished to parley. He rode alone to the no-man's land between ramparts and trenches, banners furled behind. Stannis met him, Davos at his side. Snowflakes spiraled between them. "You stole my bride," Ramsay began, smiling thinly. "An adventuring knight of the Finger Islands smuggled her out, they say. Return, Lady Arya," he savored the name, "and bend the knee, and I may yet grant you guest rights before I flay your skin." Stannis regarded him as one might regard a squirming worm impaled on hook. "Your lady was never Arya Stark," he said. "The North remembers truth." He gestured to the walls. "Surrender Winterfell. I will grant your men mercy. You and your father will answer to the king's justice in chains." Ramsay's grin widened. Too many teeth. "My father," he echoed. "I fear Lord Roose cannot answer anyone. Dire tidings this very dawn." His throat opened ear to ear in bed. Wife vanished. He cocked his head, studying Stannis for reaction. Poor Valda. Child still inside her, they say. Much blood. His smile flickered like candle in wind. "I shall wear your daughter's face for luck in battle, old man. And when I feed her fingers to my hounds, I will think of this moment." Stannis moved quicker than thought, drawing steel half clear before Davos's hand clamped his arm. Ramsay laughed and wheeled his horse, retreating amid swirling snow. The king sheathed his sword with controlled fury. "We attack at dusk," he told Davos. The snow thickened by afternoon, smothering sound. Under its white shroud Stannis advanced siege towers. Men pushed, cursing softly. Trebuchets lobbed firepots that burst against thick walls, but snow quenched flames. On the ramparts Bolton crossbows answered, quarrels rattling off crude mantlets. A single pot of burning pitch struck a Baratheon tower, spattering hot tar upon the men below. Screams sliced the wind, then dulled to moans. At the second hour past dusk, a hidden postern within Winterfell's east wall swung open, just wide enough for two figures cloaked in brown to slip out. One stumbled, leaning upon the other. Through the gloom Davos glimpsed a woman's slight form and a man's ragged gait. He guided them to the king's tent. Inside, by flickering lantern, Theon Greyjoy knelt before Stannis, chain still clasped about his throat. Beside him stood Jane Poole, cheeks tear-streaked but fiercely proud. "They beat us, your grace," Theon rasped. "But we heard you were near." Ramsay keeps the castle with fewer men than he boasts. The Manderley garrison he dismissed, fearing their loyalty. He licked chapped lips. "There is a weakness. Under the kitchen's a tunnel, bricked only by loose stones. I escaped there before when I tried to free the girl. It leads beneath the hearth of the Great Hall." Davos looked sharply at the king. "A small force might use such a way," he said. Stannis' eyes gleamed like chips of ice. "Show me," he commanded. That night Davos led a hand-picked score of men, cloaks mottled white with flour, around the southeastern curtain wall. Snow fell heavier than ever, blanketing footfalls. Theon guided them to a half-buried grate scarcely 2 feet wide. Stones were pried loose, stale air wafted, riddled with grease and ash. They crawled single file, darkness pressing like a shroud. At length the tunnel angled upward. Davos emerged into blackness beneath an iron-bound table. The great hall loomed, deserted save for bears dying in cavernous hearths. Above, banners of dire wolf and flayed man sagged from rafters. They moved quickly, blades wetted with lamp oil to stifle shine. 2 guards warming hands at a side fire died without sound. Throats parted. Davos signaled, and armorers unbarred the main doors from within. Outside, Stannis waited with 300 men. Winterfell awoke to screams drowned by blizzard. Ramsay roused half-dressed, barking orders. Courtyards filled with clashing steel and whinnying horses as Baratheon men poured through. Snow made footing treacherous. Torches blew out, plunging fights into near night. But Stannis thrived amid austerity. He fought like flint, every blow precise, economical, fatal. One cut parted a Bolton sergeant from wrist to shoulder. Another stabbed through chain at a knight's juncture, blood misting. In the kennels Ramsay loosed his hounds. The beasts lunged through the melee, jaws slavering. One bounded toward Shireen, who clung to Davos's back as he shepherded non-combatants to safety. Davos spun, blade flashing, and the hound's head thudded to snow at her feet. Shireen did not scream. She stared, lips bloodless. Within the godswood Melisandre walked alone, arms raised. Snow melted where it struck her, sizzling upon skin. She chanted, voice carrying above battle. At her feet lay a leather sack. Inside, Davos would later learn, were the severed fingers of the deserters captured weeks before. She had found her sacrifice after all, though lesser. The heart tree's face wept sap that froze like crimson tears down the bark. When dawn crept gray over blood-painted snow, Winterfell's main gate hung splintered. Ramsay Bolton was cornered in the Lord's Solar by Stannis himself. Their duel was brutal. Ramsay fought like a feral cur, twin daggers flashing. Stannis blocked one slash with steel vambrace, thrust low, and opened Ramsay's thigh. The bastard howled, staggering. Stannis drove him back against the arrow-slitted window where dawn light spilled pale as milk. Ramsay spat blood-flecked curses, raised a dagger. Stannis hewed down, sword crunching collarbone. Ramsay died grinning, lips peeled from teeth. Stannis stood over the body, blood dripping from blade tip. Davos arrived, breath ragged. "The castle is ours, your grace." Outside, horns rang, banners unfurled from ramparts. the crowned stag of Baratheon quartered with direwolf grey, stitched hastily by Shireen's own small hands through the long march. The Northmen gathered in the snow-choked yard. Lord Wyman Manderley arrived late with 500 men, knelt first. Others followed, the fat Lord Serwyn, Lady Alice Karstark, survivors of House Hornwood and Tallheart. Their voices rose, raw but resolute. The king in the north, Stannis of House Baratheon. Stannis stepped onto the broken balcony above them, sword raised. Dawn light flared upon the steel like captured fire. Snowflakes drifted, catching in his beard. Behind him, Shireen emerged, wrapped in a cloak far too large. She stood by her father's side, and the cheers redoubled until even the godswood trees seemed to tremble. Stannis let them cry themselves hoarse before he spoke, voice carrying across ice and ruin. Winterfell is taken, the usurpers lie dead, yet our war is not ended. Beyond these walls the true enemy gathers, cold and death and endless night. We will fight them here on northern soil with northern steel, and by the living blood of this realm. I spared my daughter's life because a king guards his people. So too shall I guard the 7 kingdoms, or fall with sword in hand. Let any man who would join me stand now. And they did, each by each, until the yard was a sea of bent knees. In that moment, amid swirling snow and shattered stone, the North remembered not only the old kings of winter, but the unyielding will of a Baratheon who would not burn his own blood. Above them all, against a sky growing light, the new banner snapped. A stag and a wolf, heralds of brittle hope in the heart of winter, and beneath its shadow Shireen Baratheon smiled, clutching her father's gauntlet hand. Dire wolves howled beyond the broken gates of Winterfell as dusk bled into night, their voices rolling through the bailey like drums from a distant war. Fresh snow still drifted, swirling on erratic gusts that found every breach in roof and rampart. But the wind no longer carried the Bolton's reek of flayed flesh. Instead there was wood smoke, mingled with the sharp musk of men who had marched too far on too little food and now warmed themselves at hastily kindled hearths. These fires hissed where damp pine met licking flame, casting a restless glow on stones scarred by battle. In that fiery half-light battered soldiers shuffled through slush, hauling the dead to pyres or carrying wounded toward the great hall where Maester Tybalt, rescued, shaken, yet alive, worked beside Castle Blacksclydes to mix tinctures of willow bark and potent northern honey. Stannis Baratheon had not slept since seizing the Solar. Outside the chamber Ramsay Bolton's body still lay, cooling on the rushes where it had fallen, the grin frozen upon his pale lips like the mask of some degenerate gargoyle. Guards wished to drag the corpse away, but the king forbade it until every surviving northern lord might gaze upon the bastard and see the end of flayed man rule. Now, candle in hand, Stannis paced the Solar's length. His armor was gone, exchanged for a plain quilted doublet of dark wool, yet the iron weight of command remained on his shoulders. Scabbard brushed boot top with every stride, a steady rasp that kept time with his thoughts. Ser Davos sat at a scarred table near the hearth, quill flying over parchment as he recorded the names of the fallen. Each scratch seemed louder than it should have, echoing. At intervals Davos dipped his quill, cleared his throat, and murmured casualty numbers. 47 knights, 162 spearmen, 14 archers, 3 garrons, all dead or dying. Stannis acknowledged every number with a curt nod, expression carved from the same granite that shaped Winterfell's towers. Outside, the yard would not sleep. Men moved in endless cycles, stacking captured shields, salting horse carcasses, reinforcing weak gate timbers with fresh-hewn logs hauled from the wolfswood. Torches flared along battlements where watch rotations changed. Above, the sky was a bowl of black glass spider-veined by pale green aurora. A faint moan drifted on northern air, too deep and vast to be wind alone. Some men claimed they heard wights wailing in the distance, their lament carried for leagues. Others muttered of ice spiders big as hounds scuttling in the haunted woods to the northeast. Fear and awe threaded every whispered tale. In the lowest vault beneath the first keep, Shireen sat cross-legged on a faded direwolf banner spread as a makeshift rug, her back pressed to a wine cask for warmth. She clutched a battered history of the North extracted from Winterfell's library, Sir Eustace Hightower's Withering Winters and the Wolves Who Endured, and mouthed the words as she read, tracing sentences with a fingertip crooked by chill. Her candle sputtered. A rat scurried across the floor, tail whisking her boot. She jumped only slightly. After days on the march, vermin were old acquaintance. From the passage above she heard the tramp of heavy boots and the distant boom of a hammer striking nails. The castle lived again, like some wounded giant rousing from an endless sleep. Footsteps descended. Davos's shadow stretched down the stairwell before his form appeared. He paused at the threshold, surveying the dim storeroom, then crossed to the princess. In his hands he carried a small wooden chest, the kind that once held mother-of-pearl ornaments or jars of sweet winterberry jam. He eased himself down opposite her, joints creaking more than the cask. "A gift," he said, nudging the chest across the banner. "From your father, or rather from Lord Manderley's cooks. They found it in the larder while rummaging among forgotten things." Shireen set her book aside and lifted the lid. Inside lay 6 lemons, their skins wrinkled but still vivid yellow, exuding a fragrance so bright it cut through the musty cold like summer's memory. Her eyes widened. She had not tasted citrus since leaving Dragonstone. "They were shipped north months ago," Davos explained, "for some wedding feast that never happened, hidden away when snow blocked the roads." He smiled, the Onion Knight once more. "Your Lord Father thought you might enjoy them." Shireen breathed in the scent, throat tightening. "Does Mother know?" "She will." Davos hesitated, gauging her mood. "Your Grace, there is talk among the men." "Father is king," she interrupted, voice firm though soft. Grayscale scar tissue tugged one corner of her mouth into odd shapes, but her gaze held steady. "They must speak as they will. I heard what Ramsay said about wearing my face. That cruelty is ended. Let them talk." Davos bowed his head, chastened. "You are brave. I'm just Shireen." She hugged the chest, as if its meager warmth might shield her from more than chill. "What happens now, Ser Davos? Will the Bolton's friends come for us?" "Some will," he admitted. "Most will think twice after today. Yet winter is enemy enough. And the dead." He stared past her candle at nothing. "Your father sets sentries on every wall. He means to hold until the wall's men come." Shireen reached into the chest and plucked a lemon. Juice beaded under her thumb. "I will share these," she decided. "One for Val, one for Celis, one for Maester Tybalt, one for you. And maybe I'll squeeze the last 2 for Father so he remembers summer." She smiled, small and genuine. Davos felt something hot sting behind his good eye. Upstairs, Stannis dismissed a messenger and turned to the Onion Knight as he entered. "More food," the king demanded without preamble. "Bolton stores are full, yet half-rotted. Salt what can be saved. Burn the rest. It stinks of their cruelty." "We do as much," Davos answered. "But the worst matter is horses. Barely 300 sound beasts remain." "We'll have no need to ride far," Stannis said, but his gaze flickered. "They will serve for patrols and for when snow comes. The boy will bring spare mounts. If he comes." Davos feared to add more, but the words escaped. "The Night's Watch is sworn to stay neutral, and the boy bears burdens of his own." Stannis's jaw tightened. "Jon Snow gave oath to me. Oathbreakers die." He strode to an arrow slit, the weak light silvering the creases about his eyes. "Still, he will come. He understands stakes, else the wall itself will fall." On the ramparts, Melisandre walked barefoot through thin drifts, her red silk gown trailing like blood upon the snow. Ruby at her throat glimmered. Guards shivered and made warding signs behind her, though she spared them no glance. She peered east toward the King's Road, where dark trees marched unbroken to the horizon. Flames danced before her mind's eye, shapes writhing, coalescing. She saw a whirl of ice and shadow, a horse of pale smoke, blue lights like fading stars, a stag crowned with frost. She saw Shireen's face half in light, half in darkness. The girl's smile cracked, skin flaking to ash, then knit whole again. The vision flickered. Melisandre breathed in the frozen air, tasting distant storms. A whisper curled from her lips. The choice was made. Were those words despair or quiet awe? Even she did not know. She descended the stair straight to the Godswood. There, the heart tree glistened crimson as sap bled anew from slashes in its bark. Fresh wounds reopened by some unseen hand during the night. Ravens roost among frost-laden branches, feathers fluffed. Their black eyes followed the red woman's progress until she knelt before the weeping face. "Tell me," she murmured into the silence. "Grant me vision." She pressed her ruby to the carved mouth. A throb, faint as distant drumbeat, pulsed beneath her palm. Something alive inside the frozen heart quickened, slowed, and became still. Melisandre waited. Snowflakes nested in her hair like white moths, melting to tears against her scalp. The tree did not speak. Fury knifed through her. She rose, crimson skirts whispering. "Very well," she said to the hush. "The flames will answer." In the king's solar Stannis had convened his council. Lord Wyman Manderly sat on a stool too small for his girth. Legs splayed, hands clasped on a walking cane carved into the likeness of a leaping trout. Memory of old Fry insults. Lady Alice Karstark stood stiff-backed beside him, face pinched from a hastily stitched cheek wound but eyes bright with cautious hope. The Ryswell brothers lurked near the hearth, exchanging wary glances with Nestor Royce, who represented the Vale garrison trapped in the castle since Littlefinger's intrigues. Ser Richard Horpe and Ser Godry Faring flanked Stannis. Davos took position at the king's left. Stannis addressed them like a commander reviewing drill. "Bolton power is broken, yet Dreadfort still holds 300 spears and Lord Barbary Dustin summons another 100 from Barrowton. Umbers remain divided, one brother for us, one rumored marching south with Carhold renegades, and Freys cross the Trident even now to relieve Moat Cailin. We cannot spare men to chase each threat, so they must come to us." He tapped the map spread across the table. "We fortify Winterfell. We levy the Winter Town. All who bend the knee will serve. All who resist will find heads on spikes." Lord Wyman's chins trembled. "I offer White Harbor's fleet, your grace, but the ships are iced in. My men can march. A fortnight at best," Stannis judged. "Send ravens to call them. Food stores. Dwindling," the fat lord admitted. "We prepared for siege by Bolton command, but their appetites were rapacious. I'll barter with fishing clans. The shivering sea still gives up herring through the ice." Lady Alice cleared her throat. "Carhold is yours if you name it, your grace. My uncle Arnulf stands confessed as Bolton traitor. The castle lies undermanned. The garrison will yield to the rightful lord." Stannis nodded. "We shall see to that in time." His finger circled Winterfell. "First we hold here. Winter stands between us and any swift advance south. Better to husband strength and let our foes dash themselves upon these walls." Ser Godry Faring's gauntlet fist thumped the table. "Walls won't halt dead men. We've all heard how they climb ice cliffs like spiders." Stannis's gaze snapped to him. "Hence we send riders north at dawn to scout the Long Lake and the Last River. We must know where the foe gathers." His grip tightened on map's edge. "If the wall breaks, we meet the others here, on stone warmed by mortal blood." No one spoke, though Manderly's lips moved in silent prayer to the Seven, and the Ryswells crossed themselves. Later Davos followed the king onto the ruined battlements behind the great keep. Below, smiths hammered sparks from glowing horseshoes in an improvised forge. Spears of green heartwood leaned in neat rows beside. From the kennels rose the yips of newly orphaned hounds. A crisp tang of pine mingled with smoke, reminding Davos of flea-bottom hearths and his long-gone mother's fish stew. Stannis leaned on the crenel, eyes narrowed at the night. "The lords still mutter," he said low. "Many think the snows will devour us before our enemies can." "They've not marched with you then," Davos answered, "or they would hold their tongues. They have marched, yet they forget." The king exhaled, breath steaming. "A fortnight ago they begged me to burn my daughter. Tonight they praise my mercy." He shook his head. "Fickleness. I trust it less than Melisandre's flames." Davos dared. "Does your grace regret sparing the princess?" Stannis's look could have split stone. "No. But the choice may cost us all. When dragons do not wake, men must fight with steel alone." He gazed west. "I had hoped for the sword Lightbringer. Instead I wield plain metal and stubborn hearts." Davos clasped the king's forearm. The gesture surprised them both. Stubborn hearts beat stronger than sorcery. The king's tension eased. Faintly. "A smuggler turned philosopher," he grunted, yet did not pull away. Days passed in furious industry. Snowfall eased. The cold deepened. Masons repaired gatehouses with greenstone quarried from nearby ridges. Blacksmiths melted down captured bolt and chain to brew arrowheads and nails. Carpenters felled trees in shifts beneath torchlight, shaping new hoardings and cladding towers with timber screens to foil scaling hooks. Ser Godry Faring drilled cavalry in the outer bailey, riding at straw dummies painted blue to mimic bright white eyes. Each charge ended with lances splintering, while mounted archers loosed flickering resin-tipped arrows meant to burn upon impact. Shireen oversaw scribes in the library, cataloging volumes scattered by years of neglect. She composed letters to holdfasts across the north, affixing the king's stag and wolf seal to each. Summonses to pledge fealty, requests for grain tithes, promises of justice for those wronged by Boltons or Freys. Maester Tybald administered wax to the seals despite shivering hands. The Maester swore fealty anew to Stannis, pleading forgiveness for service to Roose. Tybald's pale eyes never seemed fully at peace again. Celis, remote since the night of their march, retreated into silent piety. She set up a small shrine in a disused sept, placing candles before a wooden representation of the Seven, relics saved from Dragonstone's chapel. But the queen's prayers no longer rang with zeal. When Melisandre appeared at her shoulder one evening, offering comfort in R'hlloreth's name, Celis dismissed the Red Woman with trembling voice. In the courtyard beneath the ancient weirwood stump where formerly a snow-buried gallows stood, Lady Alice Karstark knelt beside a ring of young archers, teaching them the Karstark quick release. Her laughter, brittle but real, drifted upward like flighted arrows. Some soldiers paused in their toil to listen. Cheer was scarce, and every laugh precious. On the 8th morning, a hunting party returned breathless, half their dogs missing. They bore a single carcass, a monstrous elk slashed to ribbons, its antlers rimed with hoarfrost. No hunter claimed the kill. The beast simply stood in a frozen glade, bloodless, eyes milky, legs sunk half a foot into icy earth as though rooted. Tracks surrounding it were wrong, serrated, cloven like uncouth goat hooves yet spaced far apart, heavy. The elk's flesh was icy even in bright sun. When dragged near the forge it steamed, releasing an odor of stagnant water. Smiths refused to butcher it. Stannis ordered the carcass burned beyond the walls. It hissed, jetted clouds of gray vapor, and collapsed into tar-black sludge. That night few slept soundly. The next day a raven arrived from Castle Black, its leg bound with 2 parchments. The first was Jon Snow's short, careful hand. Davos read aloud to the king, "We are beset by mutiny within, dead without. Ser Alliser Thorne leads descent. I labor to keep the gate. Cannot march until settled, but we prepare ships at Eastwatch to ferry wildlings to Long Barrow. Hold, I will come. Burn the dead." The second parchment bore a scrawl from Samwell Tarly. "Dragonglass tested. Black blades shatter White Walkers. Supply limited. Fetch more from Dragonstone if possible. Old Town texts mention fire-forged obsidian. Send ravens with news." Stannis reread both messages thrice, then crushed them in a fist. Melisandre, summoned abruptly, entered the solar where king and smuggler stood over the forge's map. The ruby at her throat pulsed. "You see," Stannis accused, hurling the bald parchments to her feet. "Your fires show Jon Snow leading the charge beneath my banner. If mutiny kills him, your visions are false and we fall." Melisandre stooped, retrieving the pages. "Visions are rivers," she said, unfurling them. They twist with every pebble, but they reach the sea. Snow lives still. Yours is not the only banner he may bear. My patience thins, Stannis growled. Give me certainty or begone to your fires. He turned. Davos followed him into the corridor. Torches guttered, throwing shadows like grasping fingers. The boy will come, Davos assured quietly. I trust him. Stannis halted. I trust no one, he said, voice low as falling axes. Yet still I wait. As days shortened, the dead began to appear. The first patrol vanished on the King's Road 6 miles south, leaving only hoof prints that ended in churned blood. The second patrol rode into a wideout near the last river ford. Survivors stumbled back hours later, faces pale, babbling of blue lights glimmering beneath the snow, of arrows that sang like ice cracking. 3 men bore deep slashes that smoked and would not clot until cauterized. Stannis ordered all patrols doubled and forbade lone scouts. On the 12th night, the alarm bells rang from the east wall. Davos rushed up the northeast stair, lungs burning, to find archers knocking at black shapes lurching across the open fields under moonlit haze. Dozens, then scores. The shapes advanced without torches, silent save for the crunch of snow beneath stiff boots. Where moonlight caught them, eyes glowed faint sapphire. Loose, Ser Godry bellowed. Arrows hissed into the gloom. In the glare of flighted pitch one could see pale faces stretched tight over skulls. Jaws slack, leathers rimed in frost. The dead ignored the shafts that skewered throats or punched ribs. They moved until leg bones broke, then crawled using arms. Atop the rampart, men muttered prayers. A flaming pot of oil crashed into the front rank, engulfing 5 whites in orange bloom. They burned, but others clambered over their twitching char. Archers, aim for the eyes, cried Godry.
Missile whistled.
2 whites toppled backward as sapphire glimmers shattered, ice dissolving. A horn blast from the west signaled reinforcements. Karstark spears came jogging through the gate, forming ranks behind the ditch. They jabbed with long pikes tipped in star-shaped steel, some crafted hastily from blacksmith slag, others hammered from dragonglass arrowheads fixed with copper rivets. Where obsidian found eye sockets, whites collapsed, ice fracturing like brittle porcelain. Still they came. Stannis arrived on the rampart astride a steaming destrier, his own bow in hand. He knocked a single arrow whose tip glinted black, loaned from the dragonglass cache. He drew, released. The shaft streaked into the melee below. 1 white jerked and fell. The king loosed another and another. His breathing remained steady. Davos manned a catapult loaded with a slag bucket of lamp oil and tar. On command, the lever slammed forward and the bucket turned over, spewing a shower of burning pitch across the dead. Flames leapt blue-white where oil met ice, briefly illuminating the field. Men cheered but drew breath sharply when more shapes strode into view beyond the first wave. Tall figures, cloaked in mist, bearing spears that shimmered like hoarfrost. Their presence stilled the living and dead alike. From the parapet, Davos glimpsed eyes like pale stars. Others, he whispered. They advanced with unsettling grace. One raised an arm. The dead halted, forming a silent wall of frozen bodies. The other's spear pointed toward the gate. Frost crackled outward along the ground, creeping like swift ivy, freezing the ditch water solid cunningly. Whites began to climb the new ice bridge. Scorpions, Godry roared. Crewmen levered the great crossbow, launching an iron bolt as thick as a man's wrist. It struck the leading other square in the chest. The spear wielder shattered into shards of glass-hard ice, spear vanishing in tinkling splinters. The whites within 10 paces collapsed, limbs going limp. Another other stepped forward, seemingly unimpressed. Now Melisandre appeared atop the gatehouse, scarlet gown standing vivid against snow. She raised her arms. Wind gathered her hair like dancing flames. The ruby at her throat blazed, casting red ripples. Words poured from her, old Valyrian, twisted tongues of ass-high. Fire leapt along the battlements, torch to torch, a living snake of crimson. Where it ran, men cheered, courage kindling. Below, The second other flung a spear of pale ice toward the gatehouse. It streaked through the night faster than any arrow. At the last instant, the spear met a curtain of rising heat, an invisible wall conjured by Melisandre's enchantment. The spear hissed into vapor, shards raining harmlessly. The other recoiled 2 steps. Its mouth opened. A screech split the air, shards of ice tinkling from its lips. Across the field, more dead rose. Stannis dismounted, drew his sword, and strode toward the stairs. Davos caught his arm. "Your Grace, stay behind the walls," he urged, heart hammering. Stannis shook him off. "A king leads." He descended. Davos cursed softly and followed. They met the whites in the outer yard. Flames from braziers flickered, throwing mad shadows. Snow melted to slush beneath white-hot pitch. Stannis' sword hacked an armored corpse at the knee. It fell, wrist still clawing for his boot. Davos' shorter blade slashed diagonally, decapitating a boy's body swaddled in Bolton livery. The head rolled aside, jaw working soundlessly. Obsidian-tipped spears thrust over their shoulders, puncturing eye sockets. Whites toppled. Karstark men ringed their king, shields locked. The wall of shields advanced, boots slush-sucking. Each thrusting dragonglass spear felled another white. Yet the press grew thicker. Corpses clung to spear staffs, refusing to loose even when eyes were shattered. One white seized Davos' cloak, dragging him close. Its breath stank of rot and winter. Davos plunged a dagger between frostbitten ribs. Nothing. He slit its ear-to-throat line. Still nothing. A second white rammed him from behind. He stumbled, armor-scraping flagstones. Stannis pivoted, sword arcing. He cleaved through the first white spine, severing connection to unseen will. Collapsed boneless. Davos regained footing, nodded thanks, gutted the second with the obsidian dagger he kept for close work. Black shards cracked. The dagger snapped at hilt. He cursed, discarding remains and yanking a pike from the nearest dead spearman's grip. Thunder boomed above. A bolt of red-gold fire lanced from the gatehouse roof, Melisandre's doing, striking the second other. The air exploded in shower of molten ice. A howl like rending metal followed. All whites within 20 yards spasmed and crumpled. Beyond, surviving others retreated into swirling snow. Without masters, remaining undead faltered, some toppling where they stood, others staggering back into darkness. Horns sounded thrice, retreat of the foe. Men raised weary cheers. Fires were stoked higher. The wounded were carried inside. Snow began again, lazy flakes drifting down as though the sky itself exhaled. Davos leaned on a pike, chest heaving, staring at the field littered with frost-smoldering corpses. The night was silent but for crackle of flames and low sobs of survivors cradling fallen friends. He wiped sweat-iced brows and turned to the king. Stannis' face glistened with meltwater and blood, yet his eyes blazed like twin blue fires. Life, not white. "We held," he said, voice hoarse. "For tonight," Davos agreed. Near dawn messengers arrived from Castle Black. Jon Snow was dead, slain by brothers sworn. Or so the Raven said. Witnesses claimed he fell beneath daggers wielded by Ser Alliser and Bowen Marsh. No word if he lived still or was beyond reach. The parchment stained with melted wax bore only 6 words after the account. "The wall may not hold long." Stannis listened, jaw locked, then crushed the note as he had crushed the earlier ones. "Prepare," he told Davos, voice flat. "If the wall falls, our stand means nothing. We march north at first light." "But your grace," Davos protested. "Winterfell's walls are our strength. Jon Snow urged you to hold." "Snow lies dying in his own courtyard," the king rasped. "We must assume worst. If the dead swarm south, we cannot be penned here like rats. We strike before the corpses swell beyond counting." Davos opened his mouth to argue but closed it. He saw exhaustion in the king's eyes, saw also iron resolve that no argument could bend. How many men ride? 2,000 at most. Lord Manderly remains to defend Winterfell. Stannis turned away. We ride with dawn. In the Queen's prayer room, Melisandre approached the Shrine of the Seven. Candles guttered. Celis knelt, lips moving silently. The Red Woman waited until the Queen's prayer ended, then knelt beside her. "I prayed for Shireen," Celis whispered without looking up. "For her soul should we fail." Her voice cracked. "Her soul is guarded," Melisandre said, surprisingly gentle. "Your faith wrought her safety." Celis shook her head. "My faith wavered when I would have watched her burn." "That was not wavering," the priestess murmured. "That was belief tested on the hardest stone." She touched the Queen's chilled hand. "The Lord of Light yet has purpose for her, and for you." Celis squeezed Melisandre's fingers, tears welling. "Then guide me. I am lost." Melisandre's ruby pulsed. She closed her eyes and breathed flame-scented air. "Come dawn, the king rides north. Darkness rides too. We will stand in fire's path, all of us." Outside, banners hung slack in windless pre-dawn. The yard filled with mounted knights cinching girths, levies stamping to keep blood flowing, blacksmiths hammering last rivets. Shireen stood between Davos and Lady Alice, cloak clasped at her throat. She had not slept. A lemon slice rested in her pocket. She meant to chew it when the column left, so the memory of summer lingered on her tongue. Stannis emerged from the great hall clad in grey plate crusted with frost. His antlered helm shadowed stern features. He mounted his horse, Shadowfax, they called it now, though the name had belonged to another steed long ago. He looked upon his daughter. For a heartbeat, the old granite cracked. He beckoned her forward. Shireen stepped close. The king leaned down and kissed her brow, lips warm despite the cold. He spoke words no one caught. She nodded, blinking back tears. The column assembled. Baratheon knights first, Karstark spears next, Ryswell cavalry, then Norey clansmen on shaggy garrons. Behind rode wagons laden with salted pork and barrels of pitch and torches made of pine knots bound with cloth. At the rear, Melisandre rode a coal-black mare draped in crimson trappings, the only splash of color in a world of white. Horns blew. The gate creaked open. Snowy wasteland awaited, silent, expectant. The first hooves crunched into fresh drifts. One by one banners slid through the gate. Stag and Wolf, Sunburst Karstark, Silvertrout Manderley, a dozen lesser sigils stitched in haste. Shireen watched until the last company vanished in swirling flurries. Then she tasted her lemon slice and closed her eyes against the sting. That afternoon tracks of the departing army faded under fresh fall, as though the land refused memory of living men. Winterfell's watch kept vigilant. No ravens came. On the second night, the horizon to the north pulsed faint blue, like heat lightning reversed, illumining clouds from below. Some swore they heard horns deeper than any mortal bronze, calling across heavens. Manderley ordered catapults primed without cease. Stannis' host pressed on, half blinded by cutting sleet. They marched past the tumble of Queen's Crown ruins, past a frozen mill pond where stalks of dead bulrush jabbed skyward like brittle spears. In the distance, columns of dim shapes trudged south, refugees from wildling camps at Long Barrow, some dragging crude sledges, some supporting wounded kin. Stannis dispatched outriders to gather them, offering safe passage behind his ranks. Many joined. Others fled at sight of banners. Snow swallowed all. Near the village of Molestown, they found Night's Watch deserters nailed to trees, skin flayed in Bolton fashion though Ramsay was dead. A message daubed in frozen blood on one trunk read only, "The North remembers." Stannis ordered the bodies cut down and burned. Melisandre scattered ash into the wind with a prayer. At dawn of the fourth day, Shadow Tower riders met them, gaunt, eyes sunken. Their leader, a ranger named Blaine, reported that the wall held. But Eastwatch was overrun, its gates shattered by something truly colossal. Dead flooded the coast in force. The sea itself steamed where their chill met brine. Ships fled south. Some froze solid mid-bay, masts encased in rime. Stannis listened, face unreadable. "We ride faster," he decreed. Yet the horses faltered. Men stumbled like drunks. Frostbite nipped fingers through boiled leather. They reached Castle Black on ragged breath to find the courtyard filled with tangled corpses. Wildlings, black brothers, traitors, and loyal both. The gate gaped open, winch smashed. Fresh arrow shafts littered snow. The wall loomed above, glassy and silent. The top walk visible by blowing flecks revealed no lanterns. They searched by torchlight. Inside the armory they found Jon Snow's cloak draped over a barrel, black fabric crusted dark with dried blood. No body. Ghost the direwolf prowled between corpses, muzzle stained red. Upon seeing Stannis, Ghost stopped, yellow eyes narrowing, then dipped his massive head in what seemed acknowledgement before slinking away into swirling white. Melisandre knelt where the cloak lay. She touched the congealed patch, raised her fingers to lips, and tasted. "He lives," she breathed. None heard her above the roar of wind. Stannis surveyed the ruin. "The gate falls soon. We must hold the courtyard." Archers to the towers still standing, every able hand to hauling block and tackle. "Seal the breach with timber palisade, ice, stone, whatever lies nearby. We fortify until dawn." He strode into movement like an old engine sparking. Men obeyed. That night the dead tested the ring of torches twice, probing attacks from the Treeline, small packs loping on all fours. They were repelled with scorpion bolts and dragonglass arrows. In the small hours Davos walked the inner wall, listening to the hush beyond flame perimeter. It felt to him that a great lung drew breath in those woods, waiting to exhale winter. Inside the keep, Gilly the wildling nursed a babe beside a dwindling fire. She explained between tears that Jon Snow had been stabbed, carried to the table in the armory, then vanished when the Whites breached Eastwatch. Some said he rose and walked into the night calling Ghost. Others whispered the red which had spirited him away. Gilly clutched her infant tighter when Melisandre entered to collect herbs. "Fear not," Melisandre told her. "The boy you follow lives. His destiny tightens as a noose." She did not elaborate. By dawn ravens croaked restlessly. Smoke from forts east along the wall billowed black, then gray, then ceased. Flames flickered behind the Treeline, torches or something more. Men muttered of blue fire. Stannis gathered commanders in the common hall where cold seeped through stone like rising damp. "We cannot hold the wall without men on top," he said. "We scale the stairs, retake the parapet, light the beacon tower. Signal that Winterfell still stands. Those who fear heights stay below and hold courtyard." Ser Richard Horp volunteered first. Ryswell men and Karstark climbers followed. Davos eyed the dizzying switchback stair, ice-skinned and missing rail posts, then squared his shoulders. "A smuggler can climb rigging," he muttered and joined. They ascended mid-morning. Winds knifed across each flight, threatening to tear cloaks loose. Ice fangs drooped from beams, some cracked, plummeting and shattering on flags below. At one turn they found the frozen corpse of a black brother, back broken across a railing where he had fallen. His eyes open mirrored the gray world. Horp murmured a prayer and pressed onward. Near the top, the stair ended abruptly, a jagged gap where two flights had collapsed, leaving an expanse of open air. The wall's glassy face presented only occasional ice bulges. Ryswell climbers hammered pitons, looped hemp ropes, and swung across one by one. Wind howled like chorus. Davos clenched teeth, closed his good eye, and made the leap. His boots skidded on slick platform, but Horp hauled him upright. At the summit they found carnage. Bodies strewn, black cloaks and wildling furs alike, some half buried in drift, some hacked to pieces. Dragonglass arrowheads glittered amid spilled cinders. A broken horn lay near the beacon door. The beacon tower itself was sealed from within by a crust of ice. Horp hefted an axe, hacking. Chips flew. While men labored, Davos peered north across the wilderness. Mist curtained the haunted forest beyond the frozen river. Within that gloom moved shapes, too many to count, advancing slow but relentless. At their head he glimpsed tall figures astride dead horses, banners of breathless fog trailing behind. Lightning flashed, or maybe it was moonlight striking crystal armor. The army of the dead approached, mile after mile. He swallowed and turned to Stannis. "Your grace, they come." Stannis regarded the wall of mist, calculating. "Then we must light the fire so the realm may see, and pray mankind answers." He barked for more men. Axes fell, ice cracked. Melisandre, who had climbed behind them against all sense, pressed a palm to the tower door. At her touch the ice hissed, melting swifter than steel could chip. Steam billowed. The door groaned inward. Inside lay a chamber piled high with tar barrels and pine logs, forgotten since before Mance Raiders' assault. Melisandre strode atop them. She began to sing, low and resonant. Her ruby glared scarlet, bright enough to stain the inner ice red. She raised both hands. Flame erupted from her fingers, a living tongue of fire that caught the tar. In heartbeats, the beacon tower roared into an immense torch, smoke spiraling black against blue noon sky. Down on the courtyard, men cheered. South across the gift, travelers looked up to see the wall crowned in living fire. And far to the southeast, atop Winterfell's tallest tower, Shireen Baratheon stood with Lord Manderly, staring at the distant blaze feathering the horizon like dawn in the wrong quarter of sky. "They hold," she whispered. Manderly nodded, face solemn. "For now." He drew a hand across his snowy beard. "We must do our part." Grain wagons set out by dusk. Winter is king over all, but man must still eat. Shireen hugged herself against sharp wind. Below, ravens burst from rookery windows, wheeling over the yard in restless murmuration. The sight stirred something in her chest, a flutter both fearful and resolute. She turned from the parapet and hurried down narrow steps toward the library, where maps of old Valyria waited, and within them, perhaps, secrets of dragonglass fires she had read only in margin notes of forgotten maesters. Night enfolded Castle Black once more. The beacon fire blazed bright enough to paint the snowfields amber. Yet beyond its circle loomed shadows without end, an ocean of death cresting ever closer. On the wall, Stannis Baratheon stood beside Davos, both cloaked in ashes and frost, watching the horizon where the army of the dead massed like a tide under blue stars. The king's face was Unra, audible marble, but the smuggler saw weary determination etched deeper than any wrinkle. "At least the realm will see the fire," Davos murmured. Stannis's breath clouded. "Yes," he said, voice soft but unyielding. "Now we see if they dare kindle their own." High above, aurora rippled violet and green across black sky, vast and silent. In that ghostly splendor, two figures seemed small beyond measure. One king of flesh and flaw, one knight who once smuggled onions, standing sentinel on a wall of ice at world's edge, waiting for dawn that might never come, yet refusing surrender while a single spark still lived to light the dark. Snow had a sound, an almost secret murmur like cloth drawn across silk, and on the height of the wall that whisper never ceased. It sifted around crenellations, settled in every boot print, hushed even the groans of wounded men lying beneath woolen cloaks along the walkway. Stannis Baratheon stood at the western parapet while dawn crept pale and weak across a horizon smothered by storm. Below, the beacon tower still roared, flames licking crimson against the ice. But the blaze had eaten half the tar barrels, and fresh stores were scarce. Sparks fled upward in frantic swirls only to vanish against the low cloud bank. Tiny souls lost in gray eternity. Behind the king, a half-circle of commanders waited, faces drawn hollow by sleepless hours. Ser Richard Horp's helm hung at his side, visor dented by some unknown blow. His beard, once neat, bristled like iron filings. Harma the dog's head, her own mail stitched with strips of direwolf hide, gnawed jerky and said nothing. Most unsettling was Melisandre. She looked neither weary nor wind-bitten, crimson gown pristine, only the faint shimmer of frost on her dark lashes to suggest mortal flesh. Stannis lifted his gloved hand, pointing north. "They mass near the lake," he said, voice roughened by cold smoke. "Before nightfall they will come in number beyond counting." Horp expelled a ragged breath. "We hold 200 bows, 20 score dragonglass spears, and a wall of ice most leagues long. That wall still stands. But the gate is a wound," Davos reminded them. gesturing down toward the courtyard where carpenters labored on a makeshift palisade of green pine trunks, each tip charred in braziers to harden the sap. If the dead push through in force, we'll be choked before arrows matter. Stannis turned. We closed the gate, he pronounced. Not with new timbers, there is no time. We close it with fire and stone. His gaze flicked to Melisandre. Can your craft fuse ice to rock? The red woman's lips parted, a white plume of breath curling. With sacrifice enough, stone and ice may join as one. The flames must be fed. No children, Stannis said, voice a steel rasp. Give me the price else. Melisandre touched her ruby, pulsed, blood-bright. Bone and blood of the fallen will serve. Their spirits already hover at the threshold of night. I will bind them into the gate. So fused, it shall not yield. Davos swallowed. You would imprison souls within ice? They are dead, she returned softly. Better they bar the enemy than rise within it. Her gaze drifted over the rows of shrouded corpses laid out on the yard stones. Snow dusted every winding sheet. Stannis nodded once. Do it. They descended the inner stair. At the base of the wall, vast timbers lay tumbled where the great wooden gate had shattered during Eastwatch's fall. Black brothers and Karstark carpenters wrestled splinters aside, hacking jagged edges level, while teams of wildlings dragged stone blocks pried from toppled watch huts. Melisandre moved among them with an unsettling grace, red sleeves trailing ash as she daubed each block's face with runes painted in animal blood. Wherever her palm pressed, steam hissed despite the killing cold. The stones warmed to the touch. Men flinched but obeyed when she bade them lift the rune-marked blocks into the gap. By noon, a crude wall of stone and debris stood 2 men high. Melisandre climbed its uneven surface, barefoot, and began her chant. Words older than old Valyria rolled from her throat, deep, resonant, pulsing like heartbeats. The ruby at her throat ignited. Crimson loops writhed across the surface of the stones, seeping into cracks, crawling like molten vines along shards of ice. Spectators gasped as frost flashed to water, then steam, then fused glass, sealing joints with jagged seams smooth as glazed pottery. The smell was not rot nor pitch, but something stranger, dry lightning and copper. When she finished, the red woman slumped. Stannis himself reached up, steadying her descent. Her skin seemed fever-hot even through his mailed gloves. It is done, she whispered. No mortal tool will breach that seal before the flames within me gutter to darkness. Pray the Lord of Light finds it pleasing. Harma spat. Pleasing or not, the dead still come. The king addressed the assembled ranks. Rest where you may, he commanded. Sharpen steel. The sun sinks at mid-afternoon. Before the moon rises, the enemy will test the wall. He motioned to Davos. Together they strode through slush toward the courtyard's far end, where a makeshift infirmary occupied the shadow of the burned stair tower. Inside, torchlight danced over rows of wounded men. Snow-soaked cloaks had been hung on new-strung ropes near the braziers. The garments steamed, and the scent of damp wool mingled with coppery blood and the pungent brew of willow tea. Maester Tybalt and Clydas bent over a black brother whose arm ended in a bandaged stump, whispered prayers to the seven and the old gods alike as they worked. Gilly moved down the line, cradling bowls of thin broth, her babe strapped warm against her chest. In one corner, Ghost lay curled around 2 smaller direwolf pups rescued by wildlings fleeing Hardhome. The great white wolf's ears flicked as the king passed. He raised his muzzle and loosed a soundless snarl, lips curving above snowy fangs. Stannis paused, locking gaze with yellow eyes flecked in red. After a heartbeat, Ghost huffed and rested his head upon his paws, though tension still rippled beneath his hide. Davos murmured, "He waits for his master. He waits for the end of the world," Stannis muttered. "Pray we deny him." He turned away. 300 leagues south at Winterfell, Shireen Baratheon labored beneath the vaulted ceiling of the solar once claimed by Roose Bolton. The room smelled of parchment and damp plaster, for melted snow seeped through arrow slits despite hastily nailed shutters. Spread before her on a trestle table lay brittle scrolls unearthed in the library's deepest stacks. Accounts from the reign of Joffrey Baratheon, shipping manifests F from King's Landing, and a far older fragment attributed to Maester Uther of the Citadel, on the art of dragon binding and the properties of frozen fire. Shireen's breath frosted as she traced the text. Uther claimed that dragonglass, obsidian, when heated and tempered with iron impurities, could be wrought into blades that burned blue upon striking the flesh of ice shadows. The forging required sustained heat equal to a dragon's furnace or the focused breath of a glass candle. Dragonstone's long-dormant volcano had once furnished such heat. Winterfell had neither volcano nor dragon, but it possessed forges, smiths, and plenty of pig iron from the fallen gate. She rang the bell pull. Moments later, Maester Tybald's young assistant, a girl named Willa, once a serving maid, arrived, ink stains on her fingers. Shireen handed her the fragment. "Fetch the castle smiths. Tell them I need every barrel of charcoal, every iron ingot, and the hottest forge Winterfell can spare." Willa's eyebrows climbed. "Now," Shireen added, "and have Lord Manderley meet me there." An hour later, Shireen stood before the main forge, cheeks flushed from the heat erupting off twin hearths stoked to roaring by 3 sweaty smiths. Lord Wyman Manderley hovered, too large for the narrow space, wiping perspiration from thick neck folds. "Princess, it is madness to waste charcoal," he protested. "We must conserve for shoeing horses, mending armor. Shoes and mail will not slay White Walkers," Shireen insisted, voice trembling only slightly. "My father needs weapons of frozen fire. We have dragonglass arrowheads scarce as cobbler's gold. But we have iron, flux, and salt. Maester Uther says obsidian can be forged with iron if the heat is great enough." Manderley's brows furrowed. "And where do we find obsidian? The mines of Dragonstone are across open sea choked with ice." Shireen drew a small pouch from her cloak, dragging string loops undone with numb fingers. Out spilled a scatter of arrowhead shards and broken spear points, scavenged from the bodies husked at Castle Black some fortnights past. "It is not enough," she admitted, "but the library lists caches lost in the War of the Five Kings. One north of Deepwood, one at the Stony Shore, and one rumored in the Bar Rollins." Manderley let out a sigh deep as a bellows. "Deepwood and the Stony Shore lie under Ironborn raids again. The Bar Rollins are harried by Dustin's riders. To collect obsidian means sending men on long treks through war and winter." Shireen's chin lifted. "Send those willing. Promise them bright steel and gold. Promise them their names sung in halls. The dead care not for coin, but living men do." Manderley studied her. This sickly girl with grayscale scars, too removed from war's brutality, now sounded every inch her father's daughter. "Very well," he said quietly. "I will put feelers out. Risswell scouts know half those lands. But forging, little princess, iron does not love obsidian. It cracks. Quench in salt water, Maester Uther writes. A brine quench with layered heating may knit the stone." She pointed to the treatise open on a bench. "We will try." The smiths exchanged uneasy looks but began to sort the shards by size, as a jeweler might choose matching gems for a crown. At Castle Black, wind picked up mid-afternoon, blowing from the northwest in fitful gusts that smelled of snow and something older, a stench like mildew left too long inside a sealed crypt. Men along the wall tasted it on their tongues and spat. The sky, still overcast, deepened to the color of damp slate. No sun. Everywhere shadows fused until even noon seemed twilight. Only the beacon flared, a lone brand against gloaming. Archers donned leather gloves trimmed with rabbit fur and fitted new strings to their longbows, elk sinew coated in beeswax to resist freeze. Horp walked the line, barking praise where arrowheads glimmered black glass. For every 20 iron-tipped shafts there was one of obsidian, precious currency to be spent only on White Walker flesh. Below, in the yard, Karstark spearmen formed hollow squares around wagons laden with torches and pitch-soaked bundles. They listened to a grizzled captain named Hotherumber, little Hothi no longer, his elder brother's fallen, explain the torch pass. Each front-rank man carried a bundle, Every minute he struck flint and caught flame else passed it back so others might. Fire must be constant near the dead. Near sunset, an exhale of frigid air cascaded down from the wall's crown. The flames in the beacon tower momentarily guttered sideways. Men halted mid-step, gooseflesh rising. Melisandre emerged onto the main stair landing, arms bare, unshivering. She lifted her face to the wind as if greeting a lover returning from long voyage. "They are here," she whispered. Horns sounded. 2 notes, one short, one long. Riders on the western fields had sighted movement. Stannis approached the newly sealed gate, sliding his sword free with a hiss of metal. "Archers to the heights," he commanded. Loose at first sight of eyes. He glanced at Davos. "Hold fast the breach. We yield no inch." Davos hefted a dragonglass-tipped spear nearly as tall as the mast of his old black Betha. "Onions never rot in cold," he muttered, and took his position. The first whites arrived as gray silhouettes, trudging through snowdrifts thigh-deep, arms stiff at their sides. They emerged from treelines in 2s and 3s, then by dozens, then hundreds, until the white plain crawled with them. An anthill turned inside out. Some still wore bits of black cloak, others Bolton pink, others the tattered leathers of wildlings. Here and there whites of bears lumbered forward, shaggy pelts caked with frost, eyes shining ghost lamp blue. A pair of giants stalked behind, their frozen tusks gilded with ice, each footfall shaking the crust. High atop the wall archers drew. The first volley fell like black rain peppered with midnight shards. Iron tips pierced ragged hides. Bodies jerked and staggered but did not halt. Where an obsidian point found an orbit of blue, the white collapsed limp, strings cut. Cheers sounded, drowned quickly by Horp's order to loose again. The dead pressed. At unseen command they angled toward the sealed gate, converging in a funnel that forced them into narrow approach between piles of rubble and charred timbers. Stannis' chosen kill zone. From above, cauldrons of boiling pitch tilted, vomiting flaming tar that splashed and clung. Whites ignited, stumbling torches that set others alight, but still they came, black silhouettes writhing in self-made hell. Then the others appeared. 5 of them, tall and lean, cloaks rippling though no breeze stirred below. They advanced in a shallow crescent, spears glittering pale as moon shards. Frost blossomed under each footfall, ice racing outward in hissing webs. At their backs, more whites surged, momentum irresistible. On the parapet Horp readied the scorpion. Davos prayed the crew's fingers did not numb. "Aim for the tall ones," he shouted. The lever cranked down. The bolt released with a coughing thump. It streaked into twilight, trailing a faint contrail of pitch. One other pivoted with serpentine grace. The bolt shaved past, clipping the edge of an icy spear. Silvery fragments cascaded, but the creature remained. The second bolt fared better, punching through a walker's chest. The being shattered into crystalline shards. Its collapse felled a dozen whites in chain. Yet the remaining others pressed on, points raised. At the new stone ice barrier the leading whites met cold, dead end. They hammered, clawed, climbed one another, but the fused wall held. Ice spread along its outer face where walking corpses pressed chilled flesh. The others paused, eyes blazing. One stepped forward, laid his palm to the wall. Crackling erupted, hairline fractures spidered across the surface. Melisandre, from atop the battlement, thrust her hands outward. The runes she had scribed flared red. Heat rippled. The fracture sealed in molten glow. The other snatched his hand back, more surprised than pained. Frost steamed from his knuckles. He raised his spear, drew it back. Before he could hurl, a flaming arrow landed at his feet. Melisandre's voice cut through the tumult, singing in high Valyrian. The arrow's pitch ignited as if kissed by dragon breath, flames roiling bright gold. Wind whipped them upward, coiling around the pale figure. The other twisted, but heat clung. Spear drooped, crystal armor softened, dribbled like candle wax, and the being melted into a puddle of water that instantly froze to rime. More shards, more whites collapsed. The remaining walkers retreated a half-dozen paces. Their eyes blazed brighter, twin suns in corpse faces. They lifted arms in unison. A hush swept the field as if the world inhaled. Snow around their feet rose swirling in columns. Frost-bright particles gathered above them, whirling into a spinning disk of ice. Lightning crackled in its heart, blue forks of silent power. Down! Davos bellowed. Men threw themselves flat along the parapet just as the disk collapsed into a wave of jagged ice shards hurled forward. Shards clattered against the wall, smashing torches, slicing through the leather straps of cauldrons, severing ropes. One shard punched clean through Ser Horp's shield, impaling his forearm. He screamed, fell back, spurting crimson. The Scorpion crew scattered, 2 gunners clutching bleeding faces. Below, shards scythed through whites alike, but corpses simply staggered and rose. Living men fared worse. 3 Karstark spearmen died before they could throw torches. Yet the barrier held. Shards embedded but failed to penetrate fused stone. Stannis barked new orders. A cadre of archers lugged forward a contraption fashioned that morning. A crude launcher built from a ballista frame but angled steeply, its coral replaced by a barrel stuffed with clay jars. Each jar held lamp oil, pitch, and a handful of obsidian flakes. Masons had dubbed it the Dragon's Mouth. Flames from nearby braziers heated the barrel rim just enough to thin the pitch inside each jar. "Fire!" the king yelled. The release snapped. Barrel lurched upward, spitting its cluster high over the wall. Jars arced and fell among the whites massed before the others. They shattered with wet pops, spewing sticky fire that clung to flesh and fabric alike. Where molten pitch-coated walker armor it hissed, but then the obsidian shards embedded and a peculiar thing happened. The fire flashed green for a heartbeat, wildfire bright, and the shards glowed. The walker nearest burst into fragments, ice and splinters of bone flying. The one beside him stumbled but regained balance, half-torso sheared away. A roar rose from the living defenders. The last 2 others turned, surprisingly swift, and melted back into the swirling ranks of undead, snow eddying to conceal them. With their departure, the white assault lost shape. Corpses milled, still battering the fused gate, but lacked focus. Archers picked them off, torches burned paths, and slowly the yard before Castle Black cleared until only piles of ash and winter-blackened corpses remained. Night took full hold. Men breathed steam, coughed, clasped one another's shoulders. Tybalt moved among the wounded. Horp's arm was splinted. He gritted teeth but refused milk of the poppy. Stannis surveyed the dark beyond the torches, expecting a second wave yet seeing none. Davos found him alone by the west parapet later, sword sheathed, hands braced on cold stone. They retreated. "For a time," Stannis said. "They probe, test, and learn." He shook his head. "But they can be broken. You saw the dragon's mouth." "Only 3 jars left," Davos reminded. "Better than none." They stood silent a while. Wind moaned through arrow slits. In the distance, an aurora ribboned faint lavender, like bruised silk across the vault. "Your Grace," Davos ventured, "we must send word. If Eastwatch has fallen, perhaps ships fled south with small folk. White Harbor may yet receive them." "Ravens tomorrow," Stannis agreed. "Tonight we dig pits outside the barrier, fill them with pitch and stake their rims. If the dead try scaling, fire will greet them." Davos nodded and left to relay. Stannis stared north until eyelids drooped heavy. He awoke mid-sleep to the clang of watch bells. A squire pounded on his door. Ghost howled atop the wall, dire warning. Stannis buckled breastplate still warm from the forge and raced for the stair. On the parapet, the white wolf stood at the brink, hackles raised, moss-stained blue from Walker Icor earlier. He howled again, long, low, mournful. It carried over the dark like a funeral dirge. Davos emerged beside Stannis. What sets him off? Then both men saw a lone rider approaching across the moon-blanched plain. Horse black as coal, its breath pluming blue. There was no saddle. Atop sat a figure clad only in tattered cloak and rag-wrapped feet. yet spurring the animal at a pace impossible for frosted ground. The rider's head lolled, hair whipping, arms outstretched as though embracing winter. As the horse drew nearer, they saw the face. A boy's pale features marred by dried blood, eyes glazed milky white. Jon Snow. Davos swore under his breath. Ghost loosed a second howl, this one a snarl. The wolf darted down the inner stair quicker than any man. Stannis barked orders. Open the sally port, quickly. He grabbed Davos. If Snow lives. He left sentence unfinished. At the yard, men hauled the small outer door open enough for Ghost to slip through. The dire wolf bounded into the night, paws churning powder. Riders readied to support, but Stannis lifted a gauntlet, halting them. Jon Snow's horse slowed a stone's throw from the wall. Snow's body hung loose, tethered upright by some cruel magic. His eyes, once gray, now flickered azure. Frost crusted the corners of his mouth. Soft snowflakes drifted around him, but none landed on his hair, as though repelled by unseen heat. Ghost halted before its master, whined, sniffed. Jon's head turned jerkily, gaze locking onto the wolf. He opened his mouth. A gust of icy vapor puffed out, words unheard. From the slope beyond rose more shapes, white walkers astride dead elk, whites moving in rank again. This was no parley. Stannis ordered archers. Aim obsidian. Do not hit the wolf. Men hesitated. Ser Godry, arm-bound, shoved them into motion. Melisandre slid from shadow beside Stannis, face stricken. The boy yet breathes, she insisted. See his cheeks color faintly. The others bind him, but the fire in him is strong. Can he be freed? Stannis demanded. At great risk, she replied. We must break the power that holds him. The walker nearest commands his spirit. Stannis saw the walker. Tall, pale armor frosted turquoise, spear raised forming a tether of ice vapor that wound from tip to Jon's throat like a snake. The king snatched a dragonglass arrow from Davos, knocked it to his own longbow. Then we cut the serpent. No, Melisandre hissed, clutching his arm. If you miss, the boy dies. Then I shall not miss, Stannis growled. He drew, sighted a long arrow shaft. Wind calmed. Memory of days on Storm's End battlements guided him. He exhaled, loosed. The obsidian arrow whistled. The walker's head turned, sensing. Too late. The black tip punctured the glowing bridge of the creature's nose, sinking to fletchings. Shards exploded outward. The spear and walker disintegrated in a crystalline burst. The tether vanished. Jon Snow sagged forward and tumbled from horseback into snow. Ghost bounded, teeth flashing at whites rushing forward, holding them at bay. Archers loosed again, obsidian arrows downing nearest foes. Stannis yelled, "Open gate 20 feet. Riders out. Retrieve him." The fused gate could not move, but the sally port sufficed. Karstark horsemen dashed through, torches ablaze, spears like flaming lances. They carved a path to the fallen Lord Commander. One rider leaned down, heaved Jon across his saddle. Ghost defended flanks, slashing open rotting throats. Together they wheeled and galloped back as arrows hissed overhead. Enemy pursuit faltered. With the controlling walker gone, the whites' cohesion crumbled. They milled or fled. The defenders retrieved their own, slammed Sally Port, barred it with iron. Infirmary bustle returned. Jon Snow lay on a cot, skin blanched, lips blue. Tybalt and Clydas hovered, rubbing limbs. Melisandre arrived, pressed her palm to Jon's sternum. The ruby at her throat blazed bright as noonday sun. She murmured in the tongue of Ass-High. Heat radiated. Frost melted from Snow's hair. He convulsed, coughed thick clots of dark blood. Hours passed. Stannis remained, a silent sentry. Finally, Jon's eyes fluttered. Gray returned, swirling with confusion. His gaze found the king. "You came," he rasped. "I keep my word," Stannis said. Relief flickered behind stern brow. Snow tried to rise. Melisandre pushed him gently back. "Easy. Your blood was near stopped." Jon's head turned to her, recognition and wariness mingled. Your fires. They saved you, she finished with odd humility. Jon's jaw worked. The wall thorn. The traitors are ash, Davos said. The dead slew them first wave. But your Lord Commander still, if titles matter. Jon's eyes closed briefly. There is worse. The Night King rides the ice dragon now, the one from the high north. He broke Eastwatch's walls of stone and glass. He hunts for the horn buried beneath the fist of the first men. Ancient horn to bring the wall down entire. Stannis exchanged a look with Davos. Brow tightened. Then we ride before him, the king declared. We break his hold on that relic, or die denying it. Melisandre nodded, face lit by ruby. The fire inside you and the king's iron will. Together they may forge victory. She withdrew, robes whispering. Jon swallowed painfully. My brothers, wildlings. What force remains? Enough for one more stand, Stannis replied. And enough to shield Winterfell if we cannot. He clasped Jon's forearm. Rest an hour, then we plan. At Winterfell, sparks flew from the forge as smiths hammered glowing billets where iron met molten obsidian. The first attempts shattered, shards embedded in timbers like mirror slivers. But on the fifth billet the iron folded, hugging the glass, refusing fracture. Shireen clapped despite blistered palms. They quenched the blade in a trough of brine. When it rose steaming, the seam of stone and steel shimmered smoky black. Sparks danced along its edge of their own accord. Lord Manderly beamed. The Maiden Blade, he declared. Name it. Summer's Tear, Shireen whispered. She traced the fuller, where obsidian glimmered within steel like trapped starlight. For we fight to bring summer again. Word spread. Volunteers signed to ride for more obsidian, lured by promise of forging weapons named in song. Ryswell scouts departed before dawn, sleds pulled by northern mules across snow-sheeted barrows. That night Shireen dreamed of a dragon forged from glass and flame, writhing beneath Winterfell's crypts, its breath neither fire nor frost but golden light that turned shadows to dawn. She woke to horns. A raven from Castle Black slammed into the rookery window half-dead from flight. The scroll wrapped about its leg bore Jon Snow's seal, writ in unsteady hand. Night King rides to fist. Horn of winter rumored buried there. If blown, wall falls. We march to stop him. Send blades and men if any can march. Pray for dawn. Snow. Shireen carried the message to Manderly. The Lord read, face going ashen. A week's hard ride even in good weather, he murmured. We have 400 men fit, 24 mounted. The rest too raw or too lame. Send the mounted at once, Shireen urged. Each carries a blade of frozen fire. She produced Summer's Tear. It can wound the Night King. They said he is no ghost. Manderly studied the sword, then the determination rigid in the princess's eyes. You speak like your father did before the Blackwater. Very well. I will ride myself thin as I am. Knees be damned. She smiled. The songs will honor you. He chuckled, rolling shoulders. I prefer my kitchens, but songs will do. He limped off to muster. Within hours riders thundered out Winterfell's east gate. Manderly in a fur-striped surcoat, Alice Karstark beside him wielding a newly forged obsidian glaive, a dozen knights of the green fields, and 20 wildling spearwives guided by Harma's sister. Above them flapped the banner stitched of black stag and gray direwolf. Shireen watched until snow swallowed their silhouettes. She turned back to the forge. Summer's Tear was not enough. Dozens more must follow. She dunked her burned hands in snow to numb them, reached for tongs, and set another shard of dark glass against glowing iron. On the march north of Castle Black, Stannis' host trudged through drifts past the ruins of Whitetree, banners stiff with ice, horses blowing clouds like steam engines. Jon Snow rode at the king's side, swathed in bare fur, ghost pacing ghost silent ahead. Dawn painted weak stripes of color along horizon, but clouds loomed bruise-dark, pregnant with future storms. At midday scouts reported the fist of the first men visible, its ring-shaped summit crowned now with black spires of ice that had not been there seasons past. A glacier creeped down its flanks, unnatural speed, and circling overhead, far above arrow reach, wheeled a shape vast as a warship, wings beating with thunder. The ice dragon Viserion, once Daenerys Targaryen's child, now eyeless sockets lit by inner blizzard. The sight froze every heart. Melisandre approached on her mare, eyes reflecting dragon's pale flame. "That is a thing of shattered prophecies," she murmured. "Fire turned cold, yet still fire. To slay it we need heat beyond its hush." Jon's fingers flexed on reins. Dragonfire killed others at Hardhome, true fire, living. But this beast breathes frost. "Heat may lie beneath the fist," Melisandre mused. "Old tales speak of pockets where the children of the forest forged obsidian with trapped wildfire. If we break that rock shell, we unleash buried flame." Stannis grimaced. "Breaking hillsides while an army of dead surrounds? We lack miners, tools, time." Davos rode up, gray streaks in beard frosted white. "What of the horn itself? If we seize it, we deny the Night King his trump. And if he already holds it?" Jon countered. "Then we silence it," Stannis said. He raised his sword, dull steel gleaming with faint aurora reflection. "We climb the fist at dusk, while daylight still bleeds. Godry leads left, Horp right, Wildling center under snow. Melisandre remains with catapults rigged to hurl pitch at dragon when it stoops." Jon objected. "The dragon will strike from above with cold flame. Pitch will freeze mid-flight. Then we lure it lower," Melisandre said. "I will set beacon pyres along the ridge, burning hotter than mortal flame. The beast is drawn to heat, as frost to a hearth. When it stoops, dragonglass bolts greet it." Stannis's expression indicated doubt, but he nodded. "Make it so." They approached under intermittent flurries until the fist rose sheer above them, a black wound against swirling white. At its base lay heaps of bones from the Night's Watch cache discovered years prior, now cracked, gnawed, scattered by wights like discarded fowl. The interior slope where Mormont once camped was ringed by a wall of ice pillars fused to ground. Within flickered ghostlight fires, the Night King's war forges. The living army split and advanced. Footing was treacherous. Ice sheets lay beneath powder. Jon led wildlings up a goat path, Ghost ranging ahead sniffing for ambush. They met whites quickly, former brothers of the Watch still clutching rust-flecked swords. Two fell to glaives, but more poured from crevasses. The climb became crawl. Dragonglass daggers flashed in close gloom. On western slope, Stannis' knights used shields as sleds, sliding down ravines then scrambling up others, flanking the whites. Horp, arm-bound, fought one-handed, thrusting obsidian dirk into white eyes. Davos rammed a spear through a bear's frost-armored chest. The weapon snapped, obsidian shards exploding. The bear's torso caved, yet one swiping paw caught Davos's thigh, sending him tumbling. He slammed against rocks, leg numb. A squire dragged him clear. Fires blossomed along ridge where Melisandre piled pitch-filled urns and recited spells. They flared white-hot, hotter than forge bellies. Their heat punched through storm, sending up thermal columns. The ice dragon wheeled, screamed, a shriek like glaciers grinding, and stooped toward the beacon line. Catapults, repurposed scorpions banded with spring steel, launched harpoons tipped in dragonglass and wrapped in linen soaked with flaming oil. The first volley missed, wind warping trajectories. The second found target. Two bolts sank into the dragon's membrane near left wing root. Blue fire roared from its maw, ripping trenches of hoarfrost along ridgeline, extinguishing half the beacons. Men froze where blast passed, their armor rhymed instantly. The beast rose, laboring, bolts swung like earrings, tearing flesh-ice hybrid hide. It shrieked. The Night King astride its shoulders turned pale visage downward, scanning for threat. His eyes locked upon Melisandre, whose ruby now blazed like newborn sun. He gestured. The dragon wheeled again, frost breath gathering. As the creature dove, Ghost burst from a thicket of broken pines, howling. The wolf dashed across ice, drawing the dragon's gaze. Blue eyes fixated, Frost blast followed, turning ground to glass behind the fleeing wolf. Melisandre seized the opening. She hurled a firepot brimful of wildfire, stolen years ago from King's Landing stores, hoarded by Davos in case of dire need. The pot arced, flames sprouting mid-air. It struck the dragon's chest, detonating in green inferno. Wildfire coursed across the beast's frost-scaled body, melting ice, exposing underlying bone with hideous hiss. Dragon roared, wings thrashing. The Night King swayed but clung. Harpoons embedded earlier tore wider gashes, spewing shards. A third bolt launched from Scorpion hidden further downslope impaled the neck base. The dragon faltered, lost lift, slammed into the western face of the fist, sending avalanches careening. Warriors on that slope, Stannis, Horp, Davos, were tossed like dolls. Snow plumed in towering roost. The dragon slid, screams echoing, until it crashed into a ravine with an earth-shaking roar. Silence followed save for crackle of green flame devouring its corpse. Night King rose from crater amidst swirling debris, cloak smoldering where wildfire flecks clung, though flames died on contact. He strode forward, blade of crystal gripped. Stannis, bruised yet alive, picked himself up, leaned on broken shield. Distance between them shrank. Jon Snow emerged from opposite path, obsidian-lined Longclaw unsheathed. The Night King paused, considering two foes. He raised his hand. Corpses buried under avalanche twitched, stirred, crawled free. Melisandre, half-buried, thrust her ruby against exposed skin, chanting feverishly. The buried wildfire cache beneath the fist, the one she had gambled existed, ignited. A rumble shook the earth. Cracks lanced outward like spiderweb. Crimson gold light poured from fissures. Heat surged, turning snow to vapor that screamed skyward. The Night King sensed too late. Flame erupted beneath him, geysers of living fire. His form was engulfed. He raised arms, but the fire clung, crawling, purging ice flesh from bone. Crystal sword glowed red, then shattered into sparks. In less than a breath, the Night King dissolved, consumed by light hot enough to rival dragonflame. Across the battlefield, wights fell lifeless, specters severed from will. Silence crashed down, broken by steam hissing from fissures. Survivors watched as the fist's summit slumped inward, a caldera spewing fire like the throat of a newborn volcano. Stannis sank to knees, exhaustion and heat bloom overwhelming. Davos hobbled, leg bleeding, to his king. "Your Grace, it's done." "Done?" Stannis rasped. He surveyed the blazing hill, the scattered whites melting to inert flesh. Above, the ice dragon's carcass continued to burn, green tongues licking sky, the unholy creature undone by ancestral flame. "For now," he allowed. Jon Snow approached, Longclaw-stained ash. He sheathed it, met Stannis's gaze. No words passed, yet an accord formed. This night they had won not merely for crown or lordship, but for breath itself. Stannis clasped Jon's forearm. Some distance away, Melisandre knelt amid melting snow, face streaked with tears as steam rose around her. The ruby at her throat dimmed, finally extinguishing. She whispered thanks to a god who offers none. When she looked up, a faint smile curved her lips. A woman forgiven not by deity, but by deed. It would take weeks to tally the battle's cost. Riders from Winterfell arrived 2 days later, carrying the first 12 blades of frozen fire, only to find victory claimed yet desperately needed. Whites still roamed leaderless pockets, survivors lacked food. Shireen's forged weapons went to rangers hunting down stragglers. Lord Wyman Manderly wept openly upon hearing news his kitchens would feed living, not dead. At Winterfell, snow still fell, but spring's seed lay in every hearth story of that night. The night a stone-hard king spared his daughter and forged hope instead of despair. The night wildfire and dragon's glass turned winter's own weapon against itself. The night the wall burned not to fall, but to stand. And far to the south, in halls where nobles whispered of crowns and tariffs, perfumed courtiers would one day speak in hushed awe of a battered man named Stannis, once thought less bright than Robert's blazing star, who held the north with will alone and whose unbending mercy saved the realm from a dawnless cold. But that tale was yet to be sung. For now, on a shattered hilltop where obsidian sparks still glimmered in cooling rock, a king, a wolf, and a smuggler gazed at a horizon blazing pink with premature dawn. First hint that, somewhere beyond storms and sorrow, summer waited.